Thank you very much. That's very kind. So I'm gonna start off by saying Councilman Knudsen, but I much more prefer Brian. So Brian is easier for me. I am very grateful for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to start off with just some personal stories so you know where I'm coming from and why I can talk about healthcare from the perspective that I speak about. So I grew up in Utah. I've been in Las Vegas for about 18 years now. My brother had cancer throughout his entire childhood, so I spent most of my childhood at Primary Children's Medical Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. As a parent, I adopted 2 children. My oldest son is now 7, but when he was 2.5, he went into first Summerlin Hospital, and then we got transferred down to University Medical Center, and I spent about 5 weeks in the ICU there with my son. I lived there. I slept every night there. I got very familiar with physicians, with nurses, with staff from the hospital, and I was the kind of person that was up all night talking to people and getting a bunch of information. An incredibly traumatizing time for me. My son ended up getting hospitalized 3 or 4 other times for subsequent neck infections. It was a random birth defect that we couldn't treat here in Southern Nevada, and so we took him to Johns Hopkins for a 35-minute procedure, and he hasn't been sick since. My daughter was he's great. He has a little bit too much energy, and so if I could take that back a little bit, it'd be better. My daughter was 10 weeks premature. We adopted her from birth. So we spent about 9 weeks at Centene with the Dignity Health System. And what was random about that experience for me was I was, at that point, very familiar with the hospital system and living in a hospital, very familiar with it, because I did with my son. But there were doctors for the NICU at the Dignity Health System would fly in from Baltimore or another state. And so we had 3 or 4 doctors, and they'd rotate coming into Nevada for 4 days or so. They never once interacted with each other, and so every different doctor, we got different goals to shoot for a NICU baby, different milestones, different direction. So it was very complicated for me as a parent, and I thought back to my experience as a brother, where it was a very different healthcare environment than what we have here in Nevada. And so that's how I started talking about healthcare. I ran a campaign in 2019, I've been in office, and I decided to focus my entire energy and time on building up the medical district. It's the Las Vegas Medical District. It represents, within that area, UMC Hospital, Valley Hospital, now the School of Medicine, the Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine at UNLV, and a variety of other healthcare-centric organizations. It goes from Martin Luther King to about Rancho. It goes a little bit beyond that. And Charleston over to Alta. And so if you can think of that area, you should be pretty familiar with UMC if you've been in town for more than 5 minutes. Valley Hospital is right there on Shadow Lane. So when I came into office, that was my very first focus, is how can we build up healthcare and the infrastructure around healthcare to support really great doctors, really great healthcare workers, really great nurses. But if you talk to doctors and nurses in the middle of the night, they'll tell you everything. And they'll say if they had a child there, they would prefer to go out of state too. And so that was the focus, is I have incredible privilege, incredible opportunity, incredible access I have for a very long time here. It's easy for me to fly out of state and get care. It's not that way for most people in our community. And so it was this driving force of how can we build out that medical infrastructure to support families and children and seniors who can't have the same access and privilege that I've had. And so then we get to the Las Vegas Academic Medical District. It's that area within downtown Course, represented most by UMC, Valley Hospital, now the Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine at UNLV. As a city councilman, my opportunity to influence it is with land use and planning. And so there's a medical district plan that was adopted before me. Councilwoman Lois Tarkanian and Mayor Goodman and the rest of the city council adopted a medical district plan, a zoning plan that allowed for growth and development within that area. What I did with regard to the medical district was I was very, very, very aggressive with UNLV and the state of Nevada. So I'm going to talk about some of the investment that the city is making, the investment the state is making, the investment that the private sector is making, and what I anticipate will be the future of the Las Vegas Academic Medical District. There are slides here. I put that out there. I'm not going to go with slides at all. It's just there for your information. If you have questions about what you see in there, please feel free to reach out. If anything I say is wrong or inaccurate, feel free to let me know. I'm okay with that. My phone number, my cell phone is there. Feel free to text me, call me, email me, because this is going to take a monumental effort to improve the infrastructure of healthcare within Southern Nevada as I see it. So, city investment first. So city investment is about $70 million. If you've been down there lately, you'll see Shadow Lane is completely redone. There's 10 to 15 foot sidewalks, there are tree-lined streets, new street lines. The power lines are going to come down any day now, so no power lines above head. There's some public art that's just the beginnings of public art, but I've set aside about $1 million to do more public art in that medical district area because I think that's an important consideration. Talking about how do we appreciate the healthcare workers by giving them something to look at and let them know that we care about what they're doing. Shadow Lane and Pinto Lane were the first investment. Charleston is next. So anyone that lives in that area, you should be prepared. There's going to be a lot of construction, a lot. Charleston is next under construction between the 15 and Rancho. Again, it's going to be 10 to 15 foot sidewalks, tree-lined streets. There's going to be a center lane for that bus rapid transit to allow for easier access for transit. Very, very different looking Charleston than what you see right now. And then after that, we'll do construction from, this is the big construction project. Those two are big, this one's a lot bigger. It's Rancho between the Mesquite Avenue, the 95, and Sahara. The entire length of Rancho will be completely redone. 10 to 15 foot sidewalks, tree-lined streets. The entire intent is to make it so folks who work in the medical district want to live, work, and play in the medical district. It's an easier access to walk into downtown, easier access to walk around. It's a significant investment in improvements in that area. Most of you know this is the oldest part of Las Vegas, and the infrastructure has been falling apart for a while now. It's frequently under construction because of energy issues or sewer issues or lighting issues. So all of these upgrades in the infrastructure make it better for the future. That's the city's investment. What I focused on over the last couple of years during the pandemic, we had a little bit of downtime. And so I created relationships with the governor's office and the legislature and talked about how to invest in medical infrastructure. Out of that, we have $70 million that are coming into the medical district. If you haven't been to the Kirk Kerkorian Medical School, School of Medicine at UNLV, I would recommend going there. It's open now. It's surrounded by 9 acres, so it's in about 2.5 acres, and then there's 7 acres around it. That's just a parking lot. It won't be a parking lot for in 2 years. There's going to be 2 additional buildings. One of those buildings is going to be an ambulatory care center and a mental health clinic. The ambulatory care center is intended to build out the practice plan for UNLV. It's how they make money in order to maintain their medical school. The practice plan will probably be a 5 to 6 story building, 100,000 square feet. Ambulatory care center, that's their financial engine. They'll be right next to the medical school. In addition to that, there'll be a public health lab. The funding went to an organization called the Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation. It's the group that built the medical school. They're also going to build the ambulatory care center, and they're going to build this public health lab, which the city has invested about $14 million into to allow for biomedical research. So I imagine 1, maybe 2 floors of that public health lab will be intended for biomedical research. The remainder public health lab will be operated by University Medical Center. And so the entire 9 acres will be brand new buildings, and all of that the money's committed. It has to be done in the next 2 years. So we'll see designs and plans in the city in the next 6 months or so, I anticipate, and shovels in the ground. For me, it's incredibly exciting because when I talked to those physicians at 2 o'clock in the morning, they talked about the ability to research. Well, their students did. The attending physicians weren't there at 2 o'clock in the morning. The students talked about the ability to research and their need to kind of explore the biomedical research as well as serving patients, as well as being able to make money being a doctor. So that's the city's investment, the state investment. Private investment is next. So the medical school was funded through some of our largest philanthropists in town. They're also involved in building the ambulatory care center, the public health lab. The next phase of the medical district is housing. This is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable in that area, but density was one of those things that became really important to medical students in particular. I imagine traveling nurses and nurses who live in that area or work in that area. So we're providing housing. So in our next council meeting, we're approving a 7-story apartment complex right on Tonopah and Hamilton. It'll be about 250 units, market rate or a little bit above market rate. And there's space there for probably 2 or 3 more apartment complexes, I would imagine, over the next couple of years to meet the demand of medical students, plus the public health lab, plus the ambulatory care center. Enormous amount of development in that area. The next part of it is a city university private partnership. This is right on Shadow and Wellness Way, where there'll be a hotel. We've talked about medical tourism for a long time. Doug, you know that. So we'll have a hotel there right in the heart of the medical district. We'll have about 160,000 square feet of medical office space, and we'll have a parking structure because we're taking away all the parking. And so we're going to build a parking structure with a private developer, and we'll probably have to offset some of that parking with another private developer and an apartment complex. So that's the planned infrastructure. My job as a councilman was to focus on the land use, the planning, the investment in infrastructure to support the buildings. I know a lot of the folks in here would talk about how are we getting to GMEs? How do we get those residents to stay in Las Vegas? That's the next phase. I think we need to build this out as multiple phases. Now there's a place for them to go. There's a place for them to research. There's a place for them to build their practices, hopefully. We need to work on Medicaid reimbursement rates in order for them to stay here and build their businesses here. And I think we need to work on that integrated healthcare. When my son was hospitalized, when my daughter was hospitalized, when we left the hospital, there was no net to catch us in. There was nothing. So we had 7 different specialists that we had to go see for my son, and it wasn't integrated. It wasn't coordinated in any way. So, like I said, incredibly privileged access. I kind of knew how to navigate the system, and when I didn't, I knew who to call to say, navigate it for me. That's not true of anybody else, really, like maybe you all. But for most people in our community, they can't do that. And so that's the next phase of what I'll focus in on is trying to help the state understand what reimbursement looks like in order for those physicians who are coming out of medical school to be successful here, to grow a business, to make money here, so they can continue to give back to our community. And then hopefully kind of telling my story to understand what it's like to be a patient so that we can integrate some of those healthcare practices, healthcare specialties into hospitalization. Super lucky to be in the job that I'm in and at a time where this community has opened up its arms to talk about healthcare. It is a fundamental, critical need within our community. And economically, it's the most sustainable driver of our economy beyond the Strip. So when we go into a recession, healthcare is not going into a recession. It's going to be very, very strong. And it always is very, very strong. So at the city, how I talk about my ward represents the medical district, is I'm in always direct support of what's going on in our entertainment district, the Fremont East, the Fremont, always in direct support of them, but also in direct competition. If Fremont has been our economic engine in the city of Las Vegas, I'm going to also make the medical district an economic engine of the city of Las Vegas. So that's been the focus for my time in office, and I will turn it over for questions.
I'm someone who has recruited physicians to Las Vegas, and one of the things that I found was most limiting is that the wives of male doctors wanted to know, is there a good school where their kids can go within walking distance, where it's safe for the kids to walk home without getting bopped on the head? And I wonder if you've looked into the issue of providing a good school or good schools with good teachers for the kids of those who people would recruit.
So in another iteration of my life, I could have spent just as much time talking about education policy. I've had many iterations of my career, so I'm on the healthcare side, but a little while ago I was education. So the school district's tough. I'm not going to lie, they're tough. Wasden Elementary is the closest medical district school. And this next, actually on Wednesday, the IFC, the Finance Committee for the state, will be allocating $500,000 for use by me and UNLV to commit medical resources into the surrounding schools around the medical district. So bringing in UNLV, medical, dental, nursing, and mental health, and that's all dental too, to provide resources, wraparound resources, but also expose those children to the medical profession. The more somewhat controversial, depending on where you stand, is the city just started its own charter network. So we started Strong Start Academy in downtown Las Vegas. We have K through 2nd grade right now, and each year we grow, we'll add on an additional grade. So My backup plan is I will fully support the city starting its own network of schools to meet the demand that I feel from those physicians and their wives who want to send their kids to great schools. If the school district can't do it right now and they're struggling, then we're there as an active supporter, and competition's good for everybody.
When you mentioned housing, it's hit me. I have a daughter that used to work down there, my granddaughter that used to work at Quail Park and other places around there, and it's very dangerous. What are you people going to do about assuring safety in those buildings that are coming up for housing people? It's just, I mean, Smith's is not a place you want to be in the middle of the evening. And other universities have developed housing, and I'm sure they've addressed the same problems, but I'm just really concerned about the safety issue.
So the question is about safety within the area, and I get this question on a regular basis. Density helps a lot with safety. So the more people in an area, the less likely it is to be affected by crime. It also helps with improving the quality of the stores around there, the shopping materials. Density definitely helps because people walking around keeps bad people from coming out in the light. But I would also say to your daughter is I live about 2 blocks from there. Right after here, I have the afternoon off, so I'm going to go running. I'll run about 9 miles around the medical district. I feel completely safe in the area. The shadow lane changes that we just made improve the lighting, so there's more lights along the sidewalks. Lighting makes a huge difference. Crime from the Bolden Area Command, which is the area that represents that area, has been going down pretty significantly. So there's the perception of fear, there's the perception of a lack of safety, but the data wouldn't support that. And I shop at Smith's, that's my grocery store. I get pizza there, I get bagels there. That's why I have to go running this afternoon. I feel very safe in that area, and I would advocate that density is going to make it significantly more safer than it already is.
Has there been anything to address the homeless population in that area? Because there is a high homeless population. There is a couple of drug centers in that area that cater to that population, and they need greater assistance, and they can also sometimes bring in undesirable behaviors like drug use or, theft, crime, things like that. Has there been any talks about what to do about the homelessness population?
So the question is about homeless within the medical district. I'm going to kind of concentrate it. Although homeless is an issue in every city and every country, here's how we're trying to address it. Very complicated and challenging issue is one with the Metropolitan Police Department, who I work closely with. We, being the city and the county, have funded social workers to be aligned with Metro so that when Metro responds to a call, there's a social worker that's a first line of response. Sometimes it's connecting to resources that is the biggest challenge. The city's invested $40 million in the courtyard. There's multiple nonprofits, including Vegas Stronger, represented by Dave Marlin over in the corner there. One of the things that I've specifically been working on over the last couple of months with the state is we're investing $10 million from the city, and I've got the state to double down with another $10 million for a crisis residential center. So when folks, when they're picked up on the street or they're picked up in whatever situation they're in, they're brought into a place where they're evaluated for mental health issues, evaluated for physical health issues, and then routed to the appropriate placement.
And will that include emergency housing for families? Because that's becoming a major issue here is families that are being displaced, mothers and fathers with kids, and it's hard to go to a regular homeless shelter as a family unit.
So the question is about housing, and I'm going to summarize that. Here's the challenge from a housing perspective is we have about any given day, we're going to have 6,000, 6,500 folks who don't have homes within our community. We have about 2,000 homeless shelter beds. So that's 4,500 people that don't have a place to go. So the question is how is I'm going to say the valley responding to that? The city, if you haven't paid attention, we just purchased the contract to Desert Pines Golf Course. It's 100 acres. So we're going to be building out low-income and mid-income and high-income housing on 100 acres of land. We have probably 2,000 units going in right now in just my ward. And the city and county and state altogether put in probably $800 million into building housing over the next several years. That does not address the 4,500 people that are on the street now or the people who are going to become homeless. So we have a lot of energy going into building housing The transitional housing is incredibly complicated because we don't have the Medicaid reimbursement structure to support case management. I anticipate that'll change over the next couple of legislative sessions. And so that's what I would say to most folks is it is a rough situation right now, and I understand the fear. You see it on the streets, it's there. We need to work together as a community, our government sector, our nonprofit sector, and I anticipate we'll see some improvements over the next 3 to 4 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How much land do you have left to acquire? You need a lot more land to make this all come to fruition.
I would love more land. There's Daryl Altowitz. I don't see him here, but I'll throw his name out there. He owns about 15 acres. It's where the Walker Furniture site is, and I would love to find a way to turn that into medical use. There's a desperate need. We can build as much medical use as we can, and it's always going to be filled. So 15 acres is about what's left as undevelopable land. The rest of it is going to be infill development. So it's people who own properties rethinking what they're doing with their properties, and maybe going a little bit higher and adding in more functions.
Do you go all the way down to Campbell? Charleston, how far is it?
The zoning, and I'm the people who draw in with a highlighter on the map, they go up to Valley View, I think, on the north side of Charleston.
What are some of the zoning issues we're facing in terms of, I know where Scotch 80 is, they're not happy probably with this development. So how do the residents that are there react to all what's going on?
Yeah, so the folks, and the question is about zoning in the area. So zoning is really relevant to areas where it's not, if you don't live in an HOA. If you don't live in Summerlin, zoning becomes really relevant. And so there's any neighborhood meeting I go to, any individual I talk to, it's split, and it's changing a little bit. So the younger demographic who are purchasing homes in the area, they want to see a greater density. They want to see a higher rise. I personally would rather see a larger building on Charleston because it's going to block the rest of the larger neighborhoods from lots and lots of traffic. We are not going to get slower in Las Vegas. We are growing dramatically. Charleston is going to get very, very busy. And so if you have single-story development along Charleston, that does not block you from the elements of traffic and individuals walking up and down Charleston. A larger building, 3 or 4 stories, it's going to block that sound. It's going to block the folks from walking into the neighborhood. So in a neighborhood worried about zoning, there's going to be higher buildings. It's probably going to be around 3, 4 stories at the most, and it's going to bring a greater density. It's going to bring
There are going to be height restrictions on.
There are height restrictions on the south side of Charleston. Yes. I still struggle with my directions, and so it has to take a minute.
Well, you did take my wife's church.
So,
Yes, forgive.
to be honest with you, I wish the city had taken the church, but it's the state. It's the state and NDOT, and the NDOT controls that church right now, and they will for. You should throw it in. The state controls the church. They have it for 2 more years, and then they will probably auction it off. I hope it goes to a good use. I don't know how the state is going to do it, but I'd love ideas on how to take it from the state. Yes, if you have ideas, the city is going to be probably first in line to try to purchase it. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, across the country and even internationally, if there was an ideal model that you've seen that sort of we should be learning the lessons and copying. Is there one? A medical district that appeals to you?
Yes, I could talk about this all day, so I don't know how much time I have. So I personally, because I was so invested in this medical district, and the city itself was kind of invested, so I personally paid to have someone do research around academic medical districts and biomedical research in particular. So academic medical districts, there are multiple variations around the country. The ones that I look to most are the ones that I knew. And so in Salt Lake, there's the University of Utah Hospital, which is closely aligned with Primary Children's Medical Center. It's a public-private, mostly focused on academic research and academic medical care. But there's multiple around the country. I actually commissioned a paper, and so if it's okay, I'll send the email with the academic paper that I had commissioned that you can read, because it talks about not only the improvement in medical care, but it also talks about the economic impacts of an academic medical district. So much so that I've been working closely with the governor and the legislature on in the next legislative session, designating our medical district as an academic medical district with tax incentives to help encourage more biomedical research. That's the second focus that I've had, is the more lab space you create, the more economic opportunity you create. And so we at the city committed $14 million for our public health lab to include biomedical research. The data is very clear that Nevada receives less federal funding than anywhere else in the country. But since UNLV became a Tier 1 institute, our NIH funding dollar amount has gone up by about 40%. And so if we invest in research, we're going to get more federal dollars. That matters for Nevada because that drives our economic engine just as much as a casino would. If we get more high-paying jobs who are working in labs, we get more researchers who are bringing people from around the country to study diseases and study healthcare models. It's more money into our economy. So I can talk about healthcare for my son being sick. I can talk about it for my daughter being sick. I can also talk about it as an economic engine, and it is an economic engine. But I will send out, there's 2 academic papers that I commissioned myself to this group. And like I said, the more feedback you give, the more opportunity we have to talk about this issue and create that energy that is required in the state to build something from scratch. Yes, sir.
You've talked a lot about like state dollars and city dollars going into building up the medical district. Everything west of Rancho going west. So my family runs the Almond House. It's right there on Charleston and Rancho.
Yeah.
That's on the line of an opportunity.
Yay for omelets.
Still get an omelet. But we just acquired the building that was there. It's on an opportunity zone, right? So I mean, my father-in-law bought the building without even knowing. He didn't even know what an opportunity zone was. Like I had to tell him that. He's like, oh, that's pretty cool. What are we doing as far as looking for private money to sort of have opportunities to take over these rundown strip malls and areas and use that for medical infrastructure? Is that in the plans at all, or is this all just going to be state and city funded?
No, so the state and city fund is a drop in the bucket to what the private investment is. Overall, the city is investing $70 million in infrastructure. The state's about $70 million. The private investment is probably around $500 million. So if you have land to develop, you should reach out because now is the time. And the second shovels go in the ground, we're going to start getting calls around how can we develop and develop medical, develop housing, develop anything really. Because it's in an opportunity zone, because there's tax incentives associated potentially in the next legislative session, because the city's in a redevelopment area and wants to develop, there's incentives there as well. So private investment is, right now is the time to do that.
Hey, Mike, better close you up to this guy. He wants to sell his property.
Yes, sir.
There's a multiplier on these economic engines is in translational medicine. So what's the focus of this hub to be able to really bring in the big pharmas, the big biotechs to EC engines in this area?
Yeah, so the question is what is the hub? How do we recruit big companies to come into Las Vegas and spend money here? That's how I look at it. Every bit of research I've done and paid to have done has indicated that if we build it, they will come. And so there's a national lobbying group that the second I started talking about biomedical research specific to big pharma, the second I started talking about it, I got solicited by the lobbying group for biomedical research companies that said, okay, where do you have for us to go? So I honestly believe that as soon as we put shovels in the ground, there's going to be enormous opportunity for groups to rethink Las Vegas. So the initial impression from groups around the country is we want somewhere to live, we want somewhere to send our kids to school. It comes up in every single conversation. But when they see a brand new medical school, when they see a new biomedical research facility, when they see a coordinated effort of building up an academic medical district, I anticipate we're going to get calls a lot to figure out what that partnership looks like, whether the city, the county, or the state builds something for them, or whether they need land, or whatever it is they need. And that's most of the calls I filled right now is, do you have land? And we have limited land, but for me, it's rethinking the lines, and maybe we need to redraw some lines.
We have representatives from Valley and UMC here. What's your impression of going on. Is it up to your expectations?
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely exciting. You know, it was an area that was starting to deteriorate, and we were seeing that, you know, the areas around it, the clientele we were seeing. You know, I still think there is a bit of a perception and perhaps even some reality that it's unsafe. You know, we see it obviously at the hospital, but I think it's incredibly exciting, and I think we're extremely optimistic that it is going to rejuvenate that entire area and really make it a mecca and a place for patients to want to come. You know, a lot of patients want to go to a facility close to home unless there's a reason to go to some place that's specialized. So we're giving them a reason to want to travel from their home in the suburbs to what I call the inner core of Las Vegas.
I'm John O'Reilly. I'm the chair of the governing board of UMC. I concur with what Carl said. I not only spend a lot of time at UMC, but I live in the area and have lived in the area for some 40 years. And I would say that in addition to the tender loving care of the area just east of Rancho, I think you need to be very cautious about the area just west of Rancho as well, because even though the city is designated as a historic district, it's not going to be very historic or very consistent going forward if the 14 or 15 acres that's now basically torn apart there isn't developed consistent with the neighborhood. So I would say that there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of work to do, but as with any opportunity, there's a lot of risk. And I think now's the time, as you point out, Councilman, to pay particular attention to it in every detail, because if the details aren't carefully orchestrated now, they're going to be unfortunate in the near future.
Yeah, and I didn't comment on UMC's investment, but UMC is investing $50 million? It's a lot into the rehab of the exterior of University Medical Center. I've seen some of the renderings of the exterior to make it look like a mid-century modern building, along with walking paths and gardens. That's an additional investment that it's not mine to share, but it's impressive what UMC is going to do. And the balance of new versus historic is incredibly important. That's my responsibility and mine alone to balance out what folks who have lived here for generations expect out of their community, as well as those folks coming into medical school or nurses or physicians of any sort, and what they expect when they go to school there or practice there. It's a balance.
The only I'd add to that, we've spent a lot of time focused the last 8 years plus that we've been a governing board on the inside first, and there's been a lot more money than that's spent on the inside in terms of creating a whole new look and a whole new financial result of UMC that is a lot different than it was 10 years ago. So the best is yet to come, is my prediction for the whole area, including UMC.
Everybody benefits when UMC is improved and Valley's improved and medical schools there. Everyone's going to benefit in the Valley.
Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. Is there any talk or further discussion about a focus in children's hospital, dedicated children's hospital?
Yes. There's two different competing groups, and I'll be completely honest. I'm impartial. I say the best and the first out wins. The city is working with Dr. Vora, who's a very well-known physician here in Las Vegas. She treated my son at UMC Hospital. She's very engaged and active in developing a children's hospital as a nonprofit entity. The city has allocated, through an exclusive negotiating agreement, the use of Cashman Field to rethink Cashman Field. That facility is old and needs to be rethought. That area needs to be rethought. And so Cashman Field is currently set aside for the potential development of a children's hospital. There's other groups in town that are also working on plans to develop a children's hospital. If I were to predict it, I would say in 2 years there'll be shovels on the ground for a children's hospital.
My question is why? Do we need a children's hospital?
Yes.
A large percentage of the children here that need specialized care leave the state.
The state of Nevada spends about $80 million a year sending kids out of state. So $80 million a year can go towards a lot of our economic engine here in Southern Nevada if we spend that in state. It's all about money. You got to make money in this business. I get it. Any other questions?
You must have a big agenda item for this legislative session, what we're putting together. I mean, it must be something that you're gonna have to present up in Carter City.
I generally find other people who are better at presenting than I am. So with no other questions, this is my contact information. If you have ideas or thoughts, or you want to buy land, or you want to sell land, or you want to develop something, you can text me, you can call me. I am open, I'm accessible. If you think I'm doing anything wrong, please let me know. It's a complicated world out there. It's hard to figure out the right path. So now is the time, and as Mr. O'Reilly pointed out, timing is everything, and we have to maintain that balance and keep moving forward in a progressive way that'll help healthcare industry in particular. So thank you very much for your time. I'm very grateful. Thank you.